Sorry, boy. But his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is Friday, December 29th, 2023, and I'm going to take you guys through the basically Genesis 9 through 11 is the dispersion of nations. It's what kind of transcends between Noah's narrative and Abraham's narrative. So basically you want to study this stuff and you want to really nail these things down to really start to do your own research on prophecy and really start to read the prophecies and not kind of be confused about where you're going on. If you've got a pretty decent framework for these, and I would recommend getting your own blank world map, whether online or on paper, and just having a map of where these people are generally so you can understand what's going on, especially related to prophecies having to do with the last days, okay? So these prophecies, you're going to have them throughout the Bible, and they're going to name a lot of nations, and most of the nations named in these prophecies, almost all of them, are going to be listed here, or they're going to be listed in Genesis 36, that's Esau's descendants, or they're going to be listed in, I think it's Genesis, I want to say it's like 29, it's maybe 27, but it's Abraham's other descendants through Keturah and then Ishmael's descendants. So once you get that down, you understand that most of the prophecies that you're going to be dealing with are going to be related to Israel's immediate neighbors because that's who they're dealing with most of the time. But then your eschatological prophecies, a lot of them are going to go into this table of nations because they're going to be dealing with the broader world. So just to finish, you want to be very clear that Noah lived 350 years after the flood. He declared that Japheth will basically be the largest, most dominant one, but he will dwell in the tents of Shem. That's going to be a religious prophecy. So in other words, dwelling in the tents of Shem is really boiling down to being in Christ. Basically, most of your Japhethites end up being at least nominally Christian, okay? But the Japhethites are going to be the first and majority to embrace Christianity. You're going to have the Ethiopians and the Coptics embrace Christianity, but most of your those guys, and then the Kerala Indians are who embrace Christianity. But most of the people who embrace Christianity in its earlier years are Japhethite. You're going to have some descendants of Africa. You're going to have people, obviously encircling the Mediterranean and Ethiopia. So you do have the main three Hamitic groups, or the main four if you count Canaan, all embracing Christianity in the beginning, but it doesn't become as widespread. Whereas with the Japhethites, you're talking, the Russians are Japhethites, the Chinese are Japhethites, the Europeans are Japhethites, English, obviously, Americans are Japhethites. They very widely embrace it. Most of these other people are going to adopt nominal Catholicism later on, or colonial religion, and then a lot of them are getting into charismatic Pentecostal Christianity now. But I mean, in the early years, most of them are going to be Japhethites, okay? So dwelling in the tents of Shem is really remember, Christ is like a tent or a tabernacle. So it's like we put on a second flesh. That's what a tent or tabernacle is going to represent. You're going to see it used in two forms. It's either going to be clothing or a tent, and both of those were originally made out of skin. The Greek word skene is the word for tabernacle. It actually is rooted to the word skin because that's what the original tents and tabernacles were made out of, okay? So it's like Christ is our second skin. We're putting on a second flesh over our original flesh, and we're going to be resurrected in that second flesh, and that's why Peter's going to talk about putting off his tabernacle and being further clothed after that, okay? And you see that Japheth, it says Canaan will be his servant, okay? So notice it says Canaan, it doesn't say Ham. This is important because in the colonial and slaving periods of American history and English history, they're going to use this to try to make all African Americans inferior. Well, Canaan is not African, for starters. None of the Canaanites were in Africa. For second, this is one of Ham's descendants, okay? And this would account for the Hittites. This would account for all the people in the Promised Land, the Amorites, the Horites, the Jebusites, There's like 9 tribes total, but I think there's going to be 7 by the time they go into the Promised Land, and then 2 of them are not really going to be there anymore, and one is going to be become China. So I'm going to get to that in a bit. So essentially, you have the Japhethites saying that basically the Chinese are going to, that's the main Canaanites that are left, are going to be servants to Japheth. Well, if you know your deep history of China, the Chinese from the south, your Cantonese-speaking Chinese, they're going to be Canaanites. And the northern Han Chinese are going to be Mongoloid, okay? So they're going to be descendants of Japheth. And obviously the northern Chinese are going to dominate the southern Chinese. In general, Japheth is going to dominate the people south of them, because it's just the way things work out. When you move to the north, it's colder. You have to be more aggressive. You have to be more active to make it work, because it's colder, because beyond everything else, you have to heat your environment, okay? And so you just have to work harder. You're going to get stronger. You're going to develop better tools and stuff like that. And then you the other side of it is you have the winters where you can't do as much. And so what you do requires you to be extra fit, because you have to burn calories in the cold. And then on top of that, you're going to have a lot of time stuck indoors. And in that indoor time, there's a lot of room for study, for research, for sciences, for technology advancement and stuff like that. And that's where you're going to see the majority of technological advance is going to happen from Japhethites. You're going to see, even the Chinese, the Turks, the other Japhethites are going to bring gunpowder and paper into the equation and stuff like that. And then obviously the dominant technological advances from the medieval period forward a lot of them are going to come from Europe, because they're constantly warring with each other, and these are northern people fighting northern people. So the technology is going to keep getting better and better and better until they eventually just come to just take over the rest of the southern world, okay? That general trend is going to persist, and you're not going to see a non-Japhethite people be dominant after basically the Babylonians. The Babylonians are from Arphaxad. The Assyrians are from Ashur. And they're going to be the last dominant empires, and this is going to be like the 6th century BC, and from there on, it's all the dominant empires are going to be Japhethite, and that's including all the way up to the present day. Okay, so you're going to have this general trend here. Now, if you were to go read the Book of Jubilees, and I don't know, again, I'm not going to count any of this stuff as authoritative, but it might be a valid account of how they see the dispersion of nations. They believe that Noah, remember, because Noah lived in a world where the world was populated before the flood, they believe that Noah actually mapped out the world and gave portions of the world to his descendants after the flood. And not all of his descendants, but he made primary divisions between Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And one of those divisions, I'm going to show you a map here. Basically, Noah would make these major divisions of essentially the south, which to them was going to be Africa, but it probably covered Oceania too. And I imagine there was once upon a time where most of this was crammed up here. I imagine there was some kind of Pangea-style dispersion of nations, but that basically the south would go to Ham, the north would go to Japheth, and the middle would go to Shem. And so the middle is obviously the Middle East. There's a river that's going to be the Dnieper River, which is halfway through Ukraine. I actually looked it up in the Book of Jubilees and found where this river is in modern times. It is the river that Kiev is on. They said belonged to Japheth all the way out to the far northeast to the land of Gog. So remember, I believe Gog is Gogoryu in Turkey. And they basically said from here to here belongs exclusively to Japheth. And if somebody were to try to cross that border, they would be cursed. Okay? Now, I don't know how that works, because these are all Japhethites, obviously, but they're not exclusively Japhethites. You're going to have people who are Obviously, there's Semitic and Egyptian mix in the Southern Europeans. Berber mix in Spain. You're going to have people from the Sidonians, obviously, are going to be in Carthage, and so they're going to mix with here too. The Greeks are mixed with Danites, so they're going to mix up in here too. So maybe these people count as mixed people. Certainly you have Japhethites going over here, which are going to be your Germans, your Russians, and your Celts primarily. Those are going to be the three tribes, but Germans are descended from Ashkenaz. Celts are descended from Magog as well. The Gaelic people come from the Celts, and the Gauls, and all those people. And so mostly they're going to be, Magog, Rosh is going to be Riphath, and that's going to be these are going to be called the Riphean Mountains. And then that's where most of your Vikings are going to come from, and your Russians and stuff like that. So anyways, I don't know if that stands up. Again, this is Japheth, but what I got out of that is that the Jews from the Second Temple period knew that Gog was in the far northeast of Japheth's territory, which this is where Goguryeo is going to be. It's going to be North Korea and an expanded area around that, leading up and basically to what is now called the Manchukuo or Manchuria part of China. Okay, so that's kind of a generality. I would recommend you guys reading the book of Jubilees and trying to sort out those nations. Just Google them. You're going to find out a lot of these people have been researched and analyzed by other people, and you find out who these names are. I did this back in around 2005, 2006, when the internet really started, booming with information, and most of this information is still verifiable, I think. So the way this is going to be set up in Genesis 10 and 11, remember, it's the focus of the story once you get past Noah, okay? And this is all the days of Noah were 950 years and he died. That's the end of the Noah narrative, okay? So once you get past this, you're going to get into chapter 10, chapter 11. Chapter 11 is going to go down to the genealogy that leads to Abraham. And when you see, these are the generations of Shem, that is going to be another narrative, okay? So these are the generations of Shem is really going to start Abraham's narrative. And when you see what's before that, so you see Genesis 11 where it talks about scattering them on the face of the earth. What this really is a different story. It's not necessarily chronological. The Tower of Babel, in my estimation, happens around the time that Joseph gets sold into slavery, the actual confusion. They were probably building the Tower of Babel in Abraham's day. Nimrod was ruling in Abraham's day, but the actual confusion of languages does not happen till around the time that Joseph gets sold into Egypt. And that's why you have Job and Esau's son talking in the same language. You have Abraham talking with Canaanites and Egyptians in the same language. You have pretty much everybody to the point where you get to basically Joseph being in Egypt, and that is the first time you have an interpreter mentioned in the Bible. And that's because I believe that the Tower of Babel, the confusion at Babel, led to like a great worldwide depression in trade, which led to the famine. And not just, people selling less stuff, but people planting less stuff, people isolating themselves, people hoarding, and that led to a great famine. And obviously your Middle Eastern people who are living in the wilderness and herding sheep, they're going to primarily rely on the food stores of their neighbors to buy food in between, they're grazing, because they're not really planting, they're just moving around and grazing their herds. And so it's going to be those people who are going to suffer when they can't buy food and trade wool for food and stuff like that, which would have been their normal course. And that's what's going to lead Abraham into Egypt once during a famine in his day. And then it's going to lead, obviously Jacob's family into Egypt ultimately. So that's where I believe this happens. But what this is telling you, because it's leading, remember, this is in Moses' day when this is all being compiled. It's what's leading into Abraham being drawn out as a separate nation and how the nations got divided the way they are. Okay, so it's really giving you an overarching narrative of how the ancient world of Noah's day got to be the way it is in Moses' day. And so Moses is sitting here and, this is going to be roughly 250 years after the first interpreters and the confusion of languages, this is going to be world history. Everybody's going to have this. All the civilized nations are going to have this in their history. The Chaldeans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Persians, the Hittites, they're all going to have this in their history, because the people who are really keeping track know. And the civilized, nations with a lot of education and stuff like that going on, they're going to have people who are learning these different languages and figuring this stuff out. But the immediate aftermath of the Tower of Babel was the forming of nations in warring defensive postures, and basically not a closing of borders, but a diminishing of borders and trade. And that didn't really get rectified until sometime during where the Israelites are in Egypt. So it's almost like God tucks Israel in this safe place where, obviously they get enslaved eventually, but they're safe from all the chaos out there. Because you can imagine there would have been a lot of war going on, a lot of fighting over resources, just basically an overturning of the world order, and there would have been just a lot of chaos. And so God basically tucks Israel away in the safest place in the world, which is Egypt, because they have the Nile, which is very consistent in terms of its overflowing in the spring and then planting and harvesting and stuff like that. And Egypt becomes basically the superpower of the world because of that. The other part of the world that's most consistently like that is going to be like your Ganges River civilization. Obviously Mesopotamia, but Mesopotamia is getting overthrown as Nimrod's losing power. And so what ends up happening is Egypt and your early pre-Hindu civilization are going to come up and thrive during this time. And those are going to become some of the most advanced, educated places in the world. And that's why most of your mysteries and most of your religious cults and most of your ancient science and stuff like that are going to come from one of these two places. They're going to come from really India, the Ganges River civilization, or Egypt. Babylon is going to emerge as a power slowly over time between their time in Egypt and the time of Nebuchadnezzar, when they're kind of at their peak. But it takes a lot of time. They had ancient knowledge there, but obviously the dispersion of languages did a mess to them, and you're going to have a lot of wars and contention over that period until you get to Assyria taking over everything, and then finally Babylon's going to emerge as a power again, and that's what's called the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Okay, so this period is the world funneling from the ancient Babylonian kingdom, which is going to be Nimrod's kingdom, to Egypt becoming the most powerful kingdom. And so this Genesis 10 through 11, I want you to think of this as the history between Noah and Noah to Nimrod, to Egypt becoming powerful in Moses' day, okay? And that's how Moses is going to frame that. And then within that context, he's going to pull out Abraham, who is a descendant of Shem through Heber. And that's why this genealogy is going to kind of go down to Hebrew and point at Heber, and then start up with Heber's genealogy and go to Abraham, okay? So this is what he says. He says, so these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and unto them sons were born after the flood. So they had no kids when they got in the ark, okay? The sons of Japheth, Gomer and Magog, Madai and Yavin, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus, okay? So these ancient civilizations are pretty easy to track. Gomer is, that word is where we get Germany from. I think it's the Romans who name it that. But Gomer is actually going to be the Armenian people. And out of the Armenians come the Teutons, which are going to be, it's basically going to be the descendants of Ashkenaz. And that's why the German Jews are called Ashkenazi Jews, okay? You want to take that Khazar theory and you want to throw it out. The Ashkenazi Jews are Jews who mixed and mingled with the Germans, and that's why they're called Ashkenazi Jews. Gomer is going to have 3 sons, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah, okay? And these are very simply, this is the Germans, the Russians, and the Turks, okay? So Gomer is their forefather, and because the Germans become the dominant Gomerites that the Romans are going to deal with, the Romans are going to start calling the Germans It's Gomerans basically, but they're going to call them the Germans. And this is what you're going to find in the dispersion of languages. You're going to find typically the first letter is going to be the same. You're usually going to have no vowels in the original writing systems, and so what you're going to have is oftentimes you're going to have these two letters in the middle switched. So you see T G R M A H. Okay, so it's the same thing with the Turks. Okay, switch the R and the G, and you got Torgma. Okay, Turkmen. Okay, switch the R and the M, and you're going to have German. Okay, so I'm just going to add the N as like, it's kind of like I am in Hebrew and Egyptian and stuff like that, or ites. It's the Latins apparently are going to add an, and it might not be a Latin thing, it might be someone else, but that's how you're going to get German, that's how you're going to get Turkmen out of Togarma. Okay. If you were to study philology and linguistics and etymology and stuff like that, and these are all rooted in, the nature of words and language and grammar and stuff like that, you're going to find out that the dispersion of languages was not that complex. Okay, God apparently did it through angels, and basically it's almost like God gave the nations over to a certain level. I'm going to call it demon possession, but essentially it's an angelic possession to either pronounce things differently or to basically their grammatical structure is going to change. So you're going to literally have like 3 changes in grammatical structure, and it's like, just the verb go before or after the noun. You're going to have basically pronunciation. So one person might look at a G and be like, that's pronounced G. Another one's going to be, that's pronounced J. And another one's going to look at it and be like, that's pronounced K. Okay? And so it's the same letter, but they are going to pronounce that differently when these writing systems come. And there was writing before this, probably before the Tower of Babel. You're looking at cuneiform being the main language, and it looks like probably the whole world's using it. And during the confusion of languages, you're going to have Egypt switch their system to pictographs, which is where you get hieroglyphics from. So obviously, if you've got a bunch of people speaking a bunch of different languages and moving around and traveling around in your space, and Egypt was very metropolitan, pictographs are really convenient. And that's why you see pictographs a lot in the airports, international airports and stuff like that. Because you have a bunch of people from a bunch of different languages moving around, and they find their way by pictographs, okay? And then out of Egypt, I believe the Patterns of Evidence guy is right. I think Joseph came up with the first alphabet, and I think what it was a reduction of pictographs to a system of 22, I believe it is, phonemes. And these phonemes are essentially sounds. So g, ka, s, sh, and basically these sounds are then put together, and the vowels are kind of like just traditionally handed down. And then eventually they come up with systems to notify the vowels so you could know how to pronounce that if you're not from that tradition. And then those eventually formally become vowels in the Phoenician Greek script. Okay? But that alphabet that Joseph developed seems to become the basis of Arabic and the Phoenician alphabet. And the other alphabets you had developed seem to be in the Far East. You have alphabets developed in India. Remember, the Ganges civilization is going to be another one that's going to have a lot of prominence to it. And then you're probably going to have the Chinese starting to develop their characters, and their characters are originally pictographs. And then those writing systems are all going to be vertical. And I would imagine they were all originally influenced by the Chinese. So you're going to see the Mongols, the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Chinese have these vertical writing systems. You're going to have the Indians. There's going to be four alphabets in India. They're going to have a left to right system. Persia, I'm not sure what ancient Persian looked like. I've never really examined it. But you're going to have basically most of your Middle Eastern to Western alphabets are going to write left to right, and they're going to be based around 20-something phonemes, basically. So they're unique like that, okay? And they're all traced back, again, I believe they all trace back to Joseph in Egypt, okay? So let's go through these again. Gomer is going to be the Armenians. He is the eldest son of Noah, and so he's going to inherit the land around the ark, okay? You're going to have a general system go on of people getting pushed. Let me see this Middle East map. There's a place in Turkey called Batman. I just want you guys to see this, okay? You're going to have a general. This is going to be the Ararat region. It's going to be right over here, okay? So it's eastern Turkey to Armenia, and this is where they come down after the ark, okay? And you're going to have a general pattern of basically the Japhethites taking over and dominating this northern region, which is going to be the Caucasus through Turkey, and mostly eastern Turkey, okay? And that's why white people are called Caucasian. It's not, I mean, the Caucasus, there's probably, cauk and chalk and white, there probably is some linguistic root there, but these mountains are essentially the white people mountains, okay? The Caucasus region, which is this region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, is where your Caucasian people are, and that's because that's where the eldest descendants of Noah come from, okay? So those are your white people. Your Semites, basically there's going to be a general trend of pushing the younger tribes downriver as they start to grow. And so that's where you're going to see how it says they traveled from the east and found this, okay? They found Babel, okay? So basically there's going to be two river segments that the Semites and the Hamites get pushed downriver, okay? And it's going to keep going. They're doing this peaceably. This is not like over war. This is just what they're doing as their families are growing. And so you're going to see a migration down primarily the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And the Tigris and Euphrates rivers are going to meet. And see how you see all this green in this area? That's because the Tigris and Euphrates rivers come within about a few miles of each other at this center point, okay? And so as these two groups are migrating downriver down here, you're going to get to the point where it's like, well, now the two rivers meet. And so you're going to have these different Semitic and Hamitic peoples that are going to kind of meet and merge down here. And south of that intersection is going to be mostly the Hamites. North of that intersection is going to be mostly the Semites, okay? And this is going to change over time because what's going to happen is the Hamites are going to become some of the first sailing peoples, okay? Because they're going to be right here at the Gulf, and as they keep expanding, they're going to be expanding down these coastlines. And what you're going to end up having is Hamites going around here, and you're probably going to have some of them pushed down here too, which is why you're going to have Canaanites right here. But they may have all been originally pushed down here, and the oldest of the Hamites is going to be Cush, and Cush is going to end up in Pakistan down through Ethiopia and Sudan. Those are going to be the main places. And so this whole area from Pakistan to here, you see it's not that huge to transverse. You see up here, that's why you have this choke point here. These people would probably sail up this coast. They probably wouldn't go over open waters because they didn't have really deep sea vessels. They probably had skiffs and stuff that they would go up and down the coast to migrate and trade. And so you have these choke points right here, which is not that big, and then you have this choke point here. This is going to be, I think, the Straits of Hormuz. I think that is. It's either one of these two is. And that's why you're going to have contention with people taking out ships in these two areas here. So in these areas, they can just jump their ship over and then keep migrating along the coast, and then they can trade really from India all the way to Ethiopia and Sudan. And this is how you want to look at the ancient world, okay? Once you're here, you can go up the Red Sea coastline all the way up into Lower Egypt. And so you had a deep, deep network of trade and exchange of technology and religious ideas and stuff like that between the early Indians and primarily via Cush, okay? So these are going to be your Ethiopian people up to Egypt, okay? And they're all related. Mizraim, who's where the Egyptians come from, is going to be the younger brother, the immediate younger brother of Cush, okay? And the names Egypt and Ethiopia both come from the Greeks. They don't come, they're not their original names. The Greeks obviously are going to conquer a lot of this and they're going to name them something. And because their language spreads everywhere, that's what most people call them. The Greeks are going to call all of Africa Libya. They're going to call the Egyptians Egyptus, and I believe it could be a transliteration of Coptic. I used to think it could be a transliteration of Jacobites, and you're going to hear that in some of my videos, but I've done additional research, and I think Egypt you're going to have, as these things cross language boundaries, the GPT is going to be the same as CPT for Coptic people. In Caftor, you're going to hear this name Caftor, from where the Philistines come. That is going to be the youngest descendant of Mizraim, and Egypt and Copt are going to be transliterations of the same word, and so that's going to get to the Greeks. And then some of these people are going to add a vowel at the beginning of words. You see, like the French language does that a lot, where they're just going to arbitrarily add vowels at the beginning of the words so it flows more between words, okay? And so however they would say this, they would just add the it's an AE symbol, so it's kind of a Egypt, okay? And they're going to add that to Egypt, they're going to add that to Ethiopia too. So it's Diopia or whatever that is. The Diops are going to be like, means burn faces, okay? So so now we have the Gomerites are going to be in Armenia primarily. Magog is going to be the father of the Mongol peoples, and that's going to be your Mongoloids. That's going to be your Koreans. It looks like your Japanese are either going to be another Chinese people, or they're going to be a Korean people originate. In ancient Korea, you had Gog or Goguryeo, and then you have 3 southern kingdoms, and those southern kingdoms could have different origins that are more related. They could be Sinites, or they could be, but they're more than likely Mongolians. And so you're going to have, well, no, I take that back, because the Japanese are known for not having a lot of facial hair either, except for the northern Japanese, and that seems to be a Canaanite thing. The Canaanites, if you look at Canaanites on Egyptian glyphs and stuff like that, they're going to be yellow-skinned people with, watch. No, I'm sorry. They do have facial hair. Well, no, they don't. Some of them don't. So, these are going to be, the Egyptians are going to have very detailed hieroglyphs. And so you can see the difference between, these would be Africans and these would be Canaanites, okay? And you're going to find they're going to distinguish between the shades of brown there, and they're going to be pretty accurate, okay? So your Canaanite peoples are going to be yellow-skinned. Your yellowish, your Egyptians are going to be kind of like a dark bronze skin color, which is closer to like a Native American tone. And then your Cushites are going to be black. And so these are examples of Egyptians, their racial dynamics. They very clearly distinguish. This is why, like, there is no controversy over whether the first Egyptians were black Africans. The Ethiopians were, and at points in time, the Ethiopians conquered Egypt. But you're talking about, between 500 and 1,000 years after the Jews were in Egypt, okay? So you want to take myths that Egyptians were originally black and throw those out. Those are just really stupid. But these are Egyptians. And so you see very clear racial distinctions way back in the ancient hieroglyphs, okay? So just looking at these, I can go, okay, that's an Egyptian, that's a Cushite. This is probably going to be like a Hittite. I'm just guessing. Oh no, it says right here, Libyan. So these are Libyans. So apparently the Libyans were. These are going to be Phoenicians, and I think the Phoenicians had descendants of Tyre in them, which are Japhethites. So you see how white they are. These are northern Africans. You see, it says a Nubian, an Asiatic, and an Egyptian. So Asia to them could be Western Anatolia, which is going to be white, and Egyptian, there you go, and then a Nubian. A Nubian would be what they would call the black Africans, okay? So you see these in their ancient hieroglyphs. Obviously, they're using pictograms. But when these guys are doing this and they're telling stories with these pictograms, okay, and I don't know how to read this stuff, but there are people that do, you see very clear renditions of, like, here's what these people look like. Notice the patterns on their clothes and stuff like that. Here's what animals they deal with. Like, it's almost like this is their version of pack animals or cattle. And you see these guys with bows. You see these guys, so these are the weapons they have. So you see clubs, bows, spears. These are their, you can just very clearly distinguish. These are their women's headdresses. So we can go back to ancient Egypt, which is one of the most advanced, not just advanced civilizations, but metropolitan civilizations. And obviously, the East Asian people, they're not going to be dealing with what we would consider Asians today, okay? But they are going to be dealing with Canaanites who are going to... who are going to have yellow skin, okay? You can't really see Mongoloid eye in this, and I think Mongoloid eye comes from Magog up in the north. I don't think it's a Semitic thing, but the yellowish skin comes from the Canaanites. And this is going to, remember the Sinaites are going to travel to China, okay? So the reason why you don't see, most of the people you still have are going to have olive skin, not yellow skin, and you probably have a similar skin tone among the Semites, but those skin tones are going to blend together, okay? The Canaanites are mostly going to marry into, the Hebrew tribes that are around them. And that yellow skin is going to kind of disappear from the area, and it's kind of blend in with the olive skin. So I would assume that some of these people are going to be Middle Eastern Hebrew peoples, and some of them are going to be Canaanites. But remember, where do you think most of the Jews got their original wives from? Okay, obviously they're going to have Semitic people, and the Semitic people are going to tend to have olive skin, but some of them are going to marry Canaanites. Judah had a Canaanite wife, for example. Okay, so they're going to have similar skin tone. Okay, and so you're not going to have a huge distinction in them. Remember, Abraham's living among the Canaanites, the other Hebrew peoples, the Edomites, the Ishmaelites. They're going to be getting their wives from Canaanites. Some of them are going to be getting them from Semites, but you're going to have a blend of olive and yellow skin tone. Okay, and that is going to be most of your people from Arphaxad. So let's get back to this table of nations. Okay, so you have Armenia, you have Magog and Mongolians, you have Madai, which is going to be the Medes. The Medes are going to be not quite up the Tigris River, but basically just east of the Asherites, which are going to be on the Tigris River. Yavin is actually pronounced Ion, and so you're going to see this in the word Ionia, which is going to be Western Turkey. That's where the Greeks start out, okay? Western Turkey. And then the other side of the Aegean, in the northeast of them, is going to be where Tyre starts out. So you're going to see TRS, you're going to see that in the people of Troy. You're going to see that in the Thracians, so TRS, the Thracian people. And then Meshech is going to be where the Muscovites come from. Okay, so the Muscovites are going to be straight up the Volga River is where they end up, but most of these people are going to have their original settlements in northern Turkey. So think from the region in the Caucasus where Azerbaijan and Armenia are fighting right now, all the way over to what would be basically just north of Greece. Okay, that's where they're spread. Okay, and then from there you're going to have a mixed Greek civilization in Achaia, and that's going to be a mixture of people from Tyre, people from the Danites, people from probably the Philistines, the remnants of the Philistines, people from the remnants of the Hittites. Basically, all the sea peoples are going to mix there. All the peoples that were up and down the Canaanite coast are going to mix there. And then the Danites seem to be the dominant ones. So that's why Homer is going to call the ancient Greeks the Danoi. Okay? He doesn't call them Greeks. The Ionians were on the other side of the Aegean, and so they're going to be mixed to those peoples too. But the main Peloponnesian civilization, which is going to be the Greeks that sail the world pretty much, are going to be primarily Danites. Okay? So you're going to have the Medes, you're going to have the Ionians. That's the what we consider Greeks. Tubal is going to be the Georgians. So their capital, if you look at a map, is Tbilisi. So you see the TBL, Tbilisi. And then Moscow, Muscovy, is going to be M and then S, sh, k. Okay? So Mishk, M, S, H, C, H. Think of those as single letters. So M, S, C, C, Moscow. Okay? So the Muscovites, okay, that would be like the people, the ites or the M or whatever. MSC is going to be that, okay? And this is where they trace their ancestry to as well. So if you want to learn this stuff, you just want to use this letter system of just take the vowels out and you go, okay, GMR, and remember, don't be surprised if you find some of these switched around. Now, Magog, I don't know how Magog turns to Mongols, but you just see the MG and then G at the end, okay? But Medes, obviously, Madai, Medes, MD, and then remember how J's and I's and Y's are going to be transliterated across cultures. So the Ionians becomes, in the English, J, and then, I don't know how the V, but it turns into Ionia. Tyrus is going to be Troy, and I believe Tyre is going to be the remnants of Troy. I don't have hardcore proof of that, but that's just what I presume. So then the sons of Gomer are going to be Ashkenaz, and that's where your Germanic peoples are going to come from. That's going to be your Teutons and your Germanic tribes that are going to migrate up into Europe from there. They're going to get pushed by the Magogites primarily, and then the Slavic peoples are going to come from Riphath. The Slavic people, so you're going to be the Kievan Rus. The mountain range, which is going to be kind of the Ural Mountains, I believe it is going to used to be called the Riphean Mountains, and that's where you're going to be most of your Slavic peoples are going to come from. So think of the Muscovites being up and down the Volga River. Most of your Slavic people, which the Muscovites are going to come to dominate in the Mongol period, are going to be Ripheans, okay? So maybe Meshech is going to be Muscovites, or maybe the Vikings are going to be Muscovite too. But the Ukrainian peoples, which is we're going to be the Rus, the Belarus, the White Russians, are going to be Slavic. And then so are going to be your Moldovans, your Romanians are going to be a mix of Slavic and Latinized peoples, so Roman peoples. Your Bulgarians are going to, your Bulgarians are actually Huns, so they're descendants of Magog. And then your Hungarians are obviously descendants of Huns. Magyars they're called, but Magyar, you see Mongol kind of and Magog kind of mixed in Magyar. Basically you're going to have that kind of sandwich between the Romans, the Latins, the Germans, and the Russians is going to be your Slavic people. So that's going to be Riphath. Togarma is going to be your Turkmen. So that is going to be when you go to your map and you look at basically the region east of the Caspian Sea is going to be where your Turkmen migrate. And so what you're going to have is the Togarman. If you imagine Gomer's right here, it's really simple. Magog is his brother, Magog and Meshech are his brothers, so they're going to go north immediately. It's like they know they're going to be big and dominant, so they just go up north and away, okay? And so you're going to have Magog and Meshech go up north and away. Meanwhile, you're going to have, after them, you're going to have Gomer's three sons that are going to be, they're essentially, it's going to go, Ashkenaz is going to go west, Riphath is going to go just northeast of him, and then Togarmah is going to be go east. And so it's almost like they know where their brothers are going, and you can kind of see organization on this map to where like they're migrating to areas where they seem to like give each other space very clearly. Okay, and that's why I would presume that Noah probably worked this out for them. Okay, so what you have is the people of Tyrus are going to go up here. The people of Ionia are going to go right here, and then they're going to populate the islands right here. Okay, so you see a very clear division. It's almost like Western Europe gets given to Tyre, that is just so you know that Tyrus is going to be the Thracians. It's also going to be the Etruscans, so the TRS you see there, and that's going to be the Roman civilization. So it's almost like the Greeks are given Eastern Europe, or Eastern Mediterranean. The Thracians are given Western Europe and Western Mediterranean. The Slavs are given, and you need a better map here. The Slavs are basically given just straight north of them. Meshech is given the far north. Magog is given this huge expanse out here, and then just south of them is given to the Turkmen. Okay. And the Turkmen are going to all your stands. So you're going to see they're going to get down to Pakistan. Your Persian peoples are going to come from the Turks. Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, all these stand countries are going to come from there. And then eventually they're going to start pushing west. And that's where your Azerbaijanis and Turkey comes from. Okay, they're going to push west during the Mongol period. Before that, the furthest west they would be is Iran over here. And then this is a Medo-Persian Empire, so the dominant peoples are going to be the Medes first, and then it turns to the Persian peoples becoming the main people. And they're also going to keep pushing the Kushites south. And so that's why you're going to see your darker Indians in the south. Your northern Indians, which are going to be Turkish peoples, are going to develop the caste system, which is basically a racial hierarchy. Okay, so it's going to be the Turks at the top and the Kushites at the bottom. That's just how it works out because they conquer them. They keep pushing them south. And then the Kushites are probably going to be in here, and then they're going to spread to Austro-Indonesia. You probably had some land bridges here, but you can probably just, island hop as well. And then the Sinites are going to come, and it looks like they're coming up through Indochina, which is going to be south of China. And you're probably going to have them mixed in with the Burmese, the Thais, the Vietnamese, and then southern China. You see this green, fertile land they come from. And then they're going to mix with the Mongols. The northern people is going to be northern China and Korea, and they're going to come to dominate them to become the Chinese civilization. It's really not that complicated when you just know your geography. So then you're going to have Togarmah is there, and then Javan is going to have 4 sons, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim, and it says, by these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands. So it looks like Noah is dividing things up for them, and it looks like they're Noah's probably not planning for the Tower of Babel. It happens after Noah's death, but he's planning for their migration once they get to be a certain age. So if they're faithful and they're listening to Noah, they're going to go where Noah said go. I'm designating these lands to your peoples. And so what you end up having is these islands that they go to is Kittim is going to be Cyprus. Dodanim, you're going to see this look somewhere is going to say Rhodanim, and this is going to be on the island of Rhodes, which is between Greece and or it's between Turkey and Greece. Tarshish is actually going to be Spain and England. Okay, but it looks like England is probably it's a main island. And then I'm not sure where Elisha is. I think I want to say it's like Crete, or it's those islands that are between. But I think this is going to be Crete. I think this is going to be Cyprus. Those are going to be main ones. This is going to be Rhodes. And then this is going to be England. And then Ian himself, these guys are going to have other kids later on in life. His main group is going to be Western Turkey. Okay? So what he's doing is Noah is establishing where these guys aren't going to have huge land, but they're going to have predominant trade because they're on the seas. Okay, and so It says, by these the isles of the Gentile were divided into their lands, everyone after their tongue, everyone after their families in their nations. Okay, and you're going to see this word isles is going to be coasts. The word coasts is going to be the word for like borders or regions. Okay, so don't just think isles necessarily. That word can be isles, and they probably translate it to isles because these guys were mostly living on islands. Okay, but these guys were not. He's literally saying the isles of the Gentiles divided everyone after their tongue, after their languages. So it's going to do this in kind of a weird way because, again, Noah's going to talk about, or Moses is going to talk about where these people are or who they are, and then he's going to say that they're divided after their tongues and languages because in his day, everyone's already divided. You already know this. And then he's going to go on to explain how they get divided, okay? And so you want to assume that when all these people are there and they have people groups, by the time they get divided, you don't want to assume there's 70 of them, then it gets divided, okay? So then so these are going to be your Japhethite peoples, okay? And then you're going to have your Hamites. You're going to have Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan, okay? And this is really simple. This is Ethiopia, Egypt, what we consider like the Moroccans, maybe the Libyans, the Tunisians, the other side of North Africa, and then Canaan, which is going to be obviously your Western Mediterranean, the land where Israelite takes over. Okay, so the sons of Cush, you're going to see Seba, Havilah. You're going to hear Havilah mentioned, where there's gold there. It's mentioned in Genesis 1. Some people believe that is in India. Other people believe that is in Oman. I'm going to lean towards Oman. There's a lot of gold in the south of Saudi Arabia. There's mountainous regions in Yemen and Oman, and there's apparently a lot of gold there. Okay, and so you see a lot of ancient gold trade there, which makes for a really good monetary system if your Cushites are trading from basically the Indus River civilization into Africa. You're going to have, right in the middle of them, you're going to have a lot of gold deposits. And that could be they could have like brought the trade of gold as a currency into the world, okay? And Moses is apparently saying in Genesis there, the gold there is good, okay? So it might be like that's where the purest gold comes from, okay? So anyways, Seba, I'm not sure exactly where most of these guys are, but some of these guys are going to be in the southern Arabian Peninsula. But you see Sheba, Rama. These are going to be the names of gods among the Indians because those were their ancestors, okay? Sabteka, Rabba has two sons, Sheba and Dedan. And you're going to have 3 pairs of children named Sheba and Dedan. This is probably where the Queen of Sheba, or the nation of Sheba, which is going to basically be from like Eritrea into Arabia, is going to be that kingdom. Seba, you're going to have, and Rama are probably the Sheba, either Sheba or Sheba. And there's Sheba and Rama are sons of, or are Hindu gods. So maybe they're going to migrate over there. But you're going to have the Sabaeans. And the Sabaeans, most people are going to say, are going to be Sheba, which is why you're going to have multiple Shebas. You're going to have one in Joktan, and then you're going to have one that is going to be Hamite. So when Job gets his camels taken and all that stuff, those are going to be Sabaeans who take them. And I would assume they're either descendants of Seba or Sheba, not the other Sabaeans, because those would have been his brother's kids, and it wouldn't make sense that his brother's kids would go steal his sheep, right? While you're in the early days before even you have the Tower of Babel incident. But when Nimrod is ruling, the Cushites are going to be bad, and so you're going to have the Chaldeans. The Cushites are actually ruling over the Chaldeans. And you see the main people who are assaulting Job are going to be Sabaeans and Cushites, and Chaldeans, which are basically in the domain of Nimrod's people or his father's people. Okay, so it looks like you're going to have a certain alliance and a trade network, and these guys are going to try to dominate mostly the Semitic peoples. Okay, so So these guys again, they're going to spread from Kush is actually, I looked this up, and Kush is actually buried in a village in Pakistan. Noah and is buried in a village near where Gomer is, so in Armenia. And these people have really ancient like ties to, yeah, he's here. Okay. I think Gomer is going to be buried up there too. I forget where Japheth is buried. I think it might be in Turkey, or it might actually be in like Italy or something like that. I don't remember. But Japheth, obviously Jupiter comes from Japheth, which is the god of the Romans. So anyways, you have your Hamite peoples here. And then he says, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. Okay. So obviously everybody's going to know who Nimrod is. Nimrod the hunter. I believe Orion's belt. Orion is Nimrod. I don't know how the linguistics link between Orion and Nimrod. Orion is a Greek term, but he's obviously the hunter. And you do have, I think you have Hercules in the constellations too. And Hercules, I believe, is Samson. Orion, I believe, is Nimrod. Okay, and Nimrod says he began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. So obviously Moses coming out of Egypt, they're going to know who they are, because the pyramids, the big Giza pyramids, which were not built by the Jews, they were built on the Egyptians. They were built in honor of Nimrod. Well, remember, the Egyptians are going to be the brothers of Cush, and Nimrod is basically taking over the world. And it's his, it's essentially Mizraim's older brother's youngest son, who is essentially becoming a world dictator. So you can probably believe that he's not dominating Egypt, but he is they're allies with him. So the Canaanites are the Canaanites, actually, some of them look like they're getting dominated by him. Okay. But the Egyptians seem to be allies with him. And obviously the Cushites are going to be allies with him. And so what he's going to have is he's going to have this massive trade network that is going to be, so the Cushites are going to come here, the main Cushites, and then they're going to push Mizraim downriver. Mizraim seems to push Put along the coast here, and that's why they're going to end up in Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia. And then they're eventually going to get colonized in Tunisia. That's where Carthage is, by Phoenician peoples, and then Romans and Greeks and stuff like that after that. So essentially, Nimrod is going to have this choke point where the Semitic people meet and trade. And then he's going to have this sea-based trade network that goes all the way into Africa, and all the way into India, and all the way up into Egypt. So he's got access to a lot of trade, a lot of technology, and a lot of supply. And from there, when he has this trade network set up, he's going to start out way down here. And this is where the beginning, so Akkad and Iraq is where Iraq's named from. Akkad is where the Akkadian civilization is named from. I think Sumer is I'll have to look, okay. Nimrod began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. So this is going to be that word Penyam, in the presence of the Lord, so in the Lord's face. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Okay, so when you think of God saying, "Do not have any other gods before me," okay, he's going to say essentially he was a mighty hunter in competition with the Lord. Okay. So he's a mighty hunter in competition with the Lord. Okay. So essentially he's saying, I'm going to be Lord of the earth rather than Yahovah being Lord of the earth. Okay. And Nimrod is going to become world famous. And it says the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. So that's going to be that choke point between the rivers. Once he has that, he's going to try to take over and basically oppress the whole Middle East, which is essentially going to be all the way up to Assyria, all the way over into Canaan and the Horites, and then it looks like the Egyptians and the Cushites are going to have trade relations with him. He's going to subjugate the Elamites, which are going to be upriver. It's actually a tributary that comes into the Tigris River, and that's going to be one of the tribes that form Persia later. And then he's going to have basically it's going to look like his religious class, his priesthood is going to be Arphaxad, which is where the Chaldeans come from, or the Babylonians. Okay. Iraq, like I said, is going to be where Iraq comes from. Akkad is going to be where the Akkadian civilization comes from. Shinar is basically going to be the whole plain civilization where the riverbeds are for the Tigris and Euphrates. Kalna, I'm not sure. And then it says, out of that land went forth Asher and builded Nineveh, the city of Rehoboth and Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah, the same as a great city. So there's going to be multiple ways you're going to see this translated. It's one of two things. Either the Assyrians leave that area and go up into to build Nineveh, Rehoboth, and Calah as kind of like a defensive wall against Nimrod's armies and stuff up in the north, up the Tigris, which could happen. Or Nimrod went up into Assyria and he basically built those cities in order to keep the Japhethites from invading and countering him. Okay, it's very likely because Asher worships a god with like a sun disk or like wings around him and a bow. So it looks like the Assyrians could have been like tributaries or allies with Nimrod, like the Egyptians were and like the Elamites were. And they could have been up there and been his northern flank, or they could have responded to what he did and just built those cities to make themselves the mediator between him and the Japhethites, and that's how they started to get powerful. It just says out of that land went forth. Some people are going to assume that's because of the division of languages. You don't hear about the Assyrians in Abraham's day. You don't see when Abraham is fighting these four armies when Lot gets taken. Amraphel is who they say is Nimrod, or could be his predecessor, but that's probably Nimrod himself. Tidal, King of Nations, seems to be his successor. And then you're going to have, one of them is going to be, I forget who the four kings are, but one of them is going to be an Elamite king, okay? But you don't have the Assyrians mentioned. You really don't have the Assyrians mentioned until the time of David. They're prophesied by Asaph. So that's where I kind of think, okay, if Asher went forth and built these cities here, is he doing it, are they doing it as like a liege of Nimrod? And it's possible they're doing that, okay? So it's almost like he is commissioning them to go be his northern flank, if you will, to basically guard against Japhethites coming in and countering what he's doing, okay? And then it says, in Rezin between Nineveh and Calneh, the same as a great city. So notice Nineveh is not the big city. Rezin is the big city, which is between Nineveh and Calneh. And I think there's Nineveh and Calneh, and then see Rezin. So you see Asher is down here. It looks like, depending on your translation, some say that Asher founded these. Others are going to say that Nimrod founded these, okay, depending on your translation. There's also a city up there called Nimrud, which obviously suggests that Nimrod was there. It looks like he was worshipped. So it looks like if they built those cities, they built it under his authority, okay? And then it says, so that's going to be Nimrod's kingdom right here, okay? It kind of ends with Cush because Nimrod comes from Cush, okay? So, like I said, my theory, it's just theory, is that he's Sargon of Akkadian. and possibly either he or one of his descendants, or it's both the same person, is Hammurabi, who the Jews say is Amraphel. Okay, so so that's going to be his empire. His empire is going to essentially the core of his actual empire is going to span from southern Iraq into Nineveh, which is, I think, northern Iraq or southern Syria. Okay. But it's basically going to captivate that Tigris-Euphrates river valley. Now, way up the Euphrates, the Syrians are not going to really be subjugated to him, but he is going to have the core of world trade. So it's going to be the predominant, richest empire in the world. Now, that you're going to have Mizraim is going to be Egypt. We got the Ludim, Anamim, Lehabim, Nephtarim, Pathrusim, Casluhim, out of whom came the Philistines, and Caphtorim. Okay, now the Philistines could have come out of Casluhim or Caphtorim. The Bible says that he called the Philistines out of Caphtor, which means they could have been subjugated by the Caphtorim, but typically this is going to be oldest to youngest. The Caphtorim seem to be where the pharaohs come from. Also, it seems to be these people seems to dominate Lower Egypt, which makes sense because if they're being pushed downriver by Cush from Ethiopia in the beginning, the oldest ones are going to be most upriver. And this is how they would think. Upriver, you have the fresher, cleaner water. You're going to dominate. And the younger people go downriver. Well, that puts Caphtorim at the mouth of the Nile, which is where the most fertile land is. Okay? And also the sea trade and the seaports. So that ends up with the Caphtorim, even though they're downriver from Mizraim, they're actually in the most prosperous part of it. Okay, so between trade and farming, they're going to rule. They're going to crush everything, and the pharaohs are going to come from them. Not just the pharaohs, but they're going to go to. It looks like they're going to go and take over and dominate Crete and Cyprus. Okay, so basically they're gonna send the Philistines are going to be their garrison in Canaan. And they're going to dominate up into Canaan, and this is going to happen in Ptolemy's day too. They, it's a back and forth between the Assyrians, which are going to be Antioch's people, and the Egyptians, which are going to be Ptolemy's people, and they're going to dominate or fight over that region of Canaan too, because if whoever controls the highlands basically controls trade through the region. Okay. So the Philistines are going to be their seacoast people. I don't know where all these different Egyptian tribes are, but I would assume they're going to be Mizraim is going to be the furthest south up the Nile, and then these guys are just going to be up and down the Nile River. Okay, and then like I said, the Caphtorim are going to be at the bottom of the river, and then they're going to sail and populate the sea and take over really the Greek islands. It looks like. So you have a lot of Egyptian influence there until the Danites start to mix with them and kick them out. Okay. So it says, then Canaan begot Sidon. That's going to be obviously the Sidonians. This is going to be southern Lebanon. Heth, that's going to be the Hittites. This is going to be western Turkey. The Jebusites is going to be where Jerusalem is, so the highlands of Israel. The Amorites are going to be Abraham's allies, and they're going to be basically west of the Jordan River. But they're going to be kind of in the Jordan River Valley area in the north of the Dead Sea. And then they're going to spread from there. If you understand the Fertile Crescent region, you would travel up this coast toward the Euphrates, then down towards the Euphrates to Baghdad. And so these guys are going to eventually, after Nimrod and his armies come up here, try to kidnap Lot, they're going to chase them up to this area, so south of Damascus, and they're going to capture and kill lots of their armies, and that's going to lead to the decline of Nimrod's civilization. And it looks like in that decline, that's when he starts commissioning the Tower of Babel to be built. Okay, so he starts to get really tyrannical over here and force everyone to build a tower to keep his kingdom substantial after he's lost his military dominance to Abraham. And the Amorites know this because they were allies with Abraham, and so what they do is they grow and expand, and they follow back upriver, and they go back and they take over much of his kingdom. and that is going to be like the middle Babylonian kingdom. Hammurabi is supposedly other people. There's, like I said, the Jews theorize that is Nimrod, but the other scholars are going to say that Hammurabi is the Amorite king of Babylonia, which kind of makes sense because essentially what they do is they take over his dictatorship, and then the Code of Hammurabi, they basically turn it into a republic. So you have uniform laws, and they're going to rule here pretty much until Assyria gets powerful. Okay, and then Assyria is going to kick them out, and then the Chaldeans, which are indigenous to the area, are going to be subordinate to the Assyrians until they get powerful, and then they're going to finally rise up as a Chaldean. So that's going to be a Semitic people. These are going to be the indigenous descendants of Iraq, and Babylon. The third Babylonian kingdom is essentially going to be a Chaldean Babylonian kingdom. But it's going to be the Amorites that are going to capitalize on Abraham's defeat of Nimrod and go ahead and do that. The Girgashites, this is something that Origen put down. He thinks the Gerasenes, where that demoniac is, and some of them are going to say Girgasenes, is going to be the remnants of the Girgashites. So some of them are going to remain around the Sea of Galilee area. But it's going to be like to the south of the Sea of Galilee, and that's basically where the Gadarene demoniac is. They think that's Girgasenes, and there's a possibility of that. The Hivites, there's going to be the Hivites and the Horites, which I don't see the Horites here, but I think the Horites are going to be a sub-tribe of the Hivites. These are going to be I believe these are going to be your Jordan River Valley people. So think Sodom and Gomorrah. Also think Esau's two wives, okay? So the Hivites and the Horites, and then these are going to be the people who seem to disappear from Canaan, which are going to be the Arkites and the Sinites. And I know the Sinites become the Chinese. I don't know where the Arkites go. So let's see if we can find anything on them. This people comes to our notice in the inscriptions of Shalmaneser and Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria, both who describe the Arkites as rebellious. The Arkites are also known to the Egyptians, as mentioned in the Amarna tables, so these Canaanite tribes are mentioned. Their city is known as Tel Arka, a place of Tutmosis III of Egypt refers to as Arkantu. The city was later known as to the Romans as Caesarea Libani. So let's see where Caesarea Libani is. It looks like this is going to be Beirut, Lebanon area. Libanus, so Caesarea Libani. This looks like this is Beirut. So the people of Beirut are apparently the Canaanite tribe of the Arkites. That's where they're descended from. And that makes sense because Tyre and Sidon would have been south of that. And Beirut would have been their younger brother. Or Arkites would have been their younger brother. So apparently the Arkites do stay in the land of Canaan, but they're going to stay in Lebanon. And remember, the whole area of Lebanon was dominated by the Israelites at one point in time. And then the Sinites are going to be around Mount Sinai, okay? So, and then they're going to eventually move from there to China, okay? So you essentially have the northernmost of them are going to be Western Turkey. South of them is going to be the Arkites. South of them is going to be the Sidonians. South of them is going to be the Amorites. So it's almost like they're going up and down the Jordan River. And then they spread up over in the coastland from there. And then the Girgashites are going to be south of the Dead Sea. The Hivites are going to be the Jordan River Valley. The Arkites are going to be Beirut area. And then the Sinites are going to be Mount Sinai. And then there's more. This is the Arvadite, the Zemarite, the Hamathite. Let's see where these guys are. So it looks like these guys are going to be upriver from there. It has the Sinites right here, and I don't know if that's the right place for them. Zemarites, looks like there's a city called Zemar, so I would assume that's where the Zemarites are. The Hamathites, they don't seem to have a clear, this is where they are. And then they just throw the Sinites up there. They put the Hittites way down here, and I don't know why they would, because the Hittite Empire is in Turkey. And then they go down towards there from there. So that's kind of weird. This city was settled by the Orontes, who was named after his forebear Hamath. Sargon II of Assyria tells us how he conquered the city, and it was Hamath that Nebuchadnezzar defeated, where Nebuchadnezzar defeated the Egyptian armies. The Greeks and Romans subsequently knew the city as Epiphania. That makes sense, because that is Antiochus Epiphanes, I'll bet. Manifestation. Anatolia. So it looks like these guys could have mixed up with the Hittites. That's going to be the Hamathites, the Arvadites. And these tools, you guys, were not... These tools, so this is Creation Wiki, okay? These were not around when I was in college. It was a lot harder to look for this stuff, and you had to be a lot more speculative. But the Arvadites, let's see, it says, this people settled on the island that bore their name, Arvad. Today it is called Arwad, or Ruad Island, so let's see where that is. The only island in Syria that lies north of the Bay of Tripoli, 2 miles out to sea. The Arvadites were famed for Old World for their skillful seamanship. Drawing for this even the grudging admiration of the Assyrians. Later, the Isle of Arvad was to play a crucial role in controlling certain areas of the mainland, including during the conquest of Alexander the Great. The Arvadites are also known for the Amun-Ra tablets in Arwada. So, again, a lot of this stuff is more recent scholarship. Okay, they're finding these Amun-Ra letters of Egypt and these Assyrian records of basically the people groups that they had to deal with. Okay, and Egypt and Assyria were essentially the main two kingdoms for between Israel. Essentially, Israel was a pretty prominent kingdom for a while themselves, but between essentially the time of Moses and the time of the Babylonian conquest. Those are the main two empires in the world, is Assyria and Egypt, okay? And so they have tons of records of the other peoples they're having to deal with in different little battles and stuff like this. Look at this. It says, part of the Arvite tribe may have founded the kingdom of Arva in Southeast Asia. Remember, these guys are migrating out, okay? So Burma, Myanmar, okay, is going to be, looks like Arvites. And it says, and Pegu, prior to the annexation of the 19th century British, okay? It says, if so, they probably would have traveled that region with or alongside Elisha. Remember, that's a Greek people, the son of Japheth. So they're saying that the Japhethites could have, the Greeks could have gone to the Far East as well. So remember how I told you these people, it says that they started out there, and then it says, and afterwards the family of the Canaanites spread abroad, okay? So it looks like a lot of them did move away, but he's saying this is where their original border was from Sidon, Gerar. Gerar is going to be in south in the Negev. Sidon obviously is going to be in southern Lebanon. Gaza is going to be where the Philistines are. As thou goest to Sodom and Gomorrah, that's going to be Jordan River Valley, Admah, Zeboim, even unto Lasha. Okay, so this is literally is going to be, it's just writing a square. This is their land, and that is the primary land that is given to the Israelites. Okay, so that's why where their land is going to be important to Moses, because that's the land he's bid to go conquer. Okay, But that's why you're going to see these tribes, and then it's going to say, and afterward were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. Remember, this is Moses. So they're not spread abroad because of the Israelite conquest. They have spread abroad since then. And so that's why you're going to have, it looks like Arvadites and Sinites are going to be going to East Asia. Some of the Arvadites and Hethites are going to be going to, or Hittites are going to be going up into Turkey. And most of the rest of them, these Amorites are going to spread over to Babylon, and most of them are going to stay there. So the core of their land is going to become Israel, but the Hittites are actually pretty much, or the Canaanites are pretty much the dominant people group outside of Egypt and Assyria. Those are going to be the main two, and the Hittites are actually going to openly contend with the Egyptians. So if not for, this is important, remember, Canaan is cursed to be a servant of servants, yet if not for the conquest by Abraham, it looks like they were in a good position to dominate the world if they were able to stay united and pull it together. Okay, it's when the Egyptians are weakened, the Assyrians are not powerful yet, the Hittites seem to be one of the most powerful empires, but they're basically, you have Canaanites controlling Babylonia, Mesopotamia, eastern or western Anatolia, which is Turkey, and then the region of the Jews, and then they've got access to the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the Euphrates River. So that it looks like they had the capacity to become a very powerful empire, if not for the Jews coming in and taking them out. Okay. So it says that's where they are, and then it says these are the sons of Ham after their families, after their tongues, in their countries, and into their nations. So that kind of gives you the breakdown of the Hamites. That goes from verse 6 to verse 20. Okay, and it says unto Shem also, the father of the children of Eber. Now keep in mind, as Moses is writing this, they know where these people are. So when he's writing these records, it's not a mystery where these people are. Okay. Most of these Japhethites are probably still up in Turkey by the time that Moses is writing this. They probably have begun to migrate out. Remember, there's this ice wall that is receding because there's this basically ice age that stops the flood. And then this ice is receding. And as it's receding, you're going to have more and more rains coming. Okay? And basically, you're going to have it keep receding until you have a thick, thick ice shelf up in the North Pole and the South Pole. And as that's receding, the Japhethites are going to be probably spreading south of it. Okay? But a lot of this is going to be happening between the days of Noah. So you're looking 1656 after the creation of the earth, which is roughly, it's going to start about 2,500 years BC. And then it's going to expand to about, I think Moses' day is like 1400 BC, so that's like 1,000-year period where they're going to be spreading up from there. And by the time Moses is writing this, they've probably spread abroad in the north, but it doesn't, like, they're not really keeping, you see the least amount of information about the Japhethites, and the reason is well, we know about, these Greek tribes because they're near them, right? And they know who these people were back in Noah's day, but you notice you have the least amount about their sons, right? So Ashkenaz's 3 sons, obviously he's the eldest son, and so his sons are going to be right there in the Caucasus. They're going to know about them the most, and then the Greeks, they're going to mostly intermingle with them. But the older sons of Japheth, outside of Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan is obviously they're going to talk about Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. They're not interacting with these guys that much, especially Magog. Madai, they're going to. Magog, they're not going to. Ashkenaz, they're not really going to. Tubal, they're not really going to. And so you don't see anything about their sons. Not that affects, because again, this whole Table of Nations dispersion was affected by God and Noah, apparently. But you don't hear them talking about them until you get into prophecies later on, where they're going to prophesy stuff about them in the last days. Okay, but they just don't keep track of them because those are the guys. Remember, Assyria is kind of their wall between them and most of the Japhethites. Okay, so after you get through the Hamites, he's going to say, okay, unto Shem also, the father of the children of Eber. Okay, so Remember, this is going to lead to Abraham the Hebrew. Okay, he's a descendant of Eber. And this is why it's going to entitle this last part, unto Shem also, the father of the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder. So they're making very clear Japheth is older than Shem, and Ham is probably the youngest, and Shem is the father of Eber. Unto him children are born. Okay, so this is where this is leading to. Is Moses is telling you about the dispersion of nations, and then he's telling you now here's where Abraham's people come from. Okay, so he says the children of Shem, Elam. Remember, that's going to be a tribe that's part of the Persian Empire. Asher, that's going to be Assyria. Arphaxad is going to be the Chaldeans. Lud is going to be Lydia. This is going to be a people that is kind of accounted among the Greeks, but they're really, think the absolute north end of the Euphrates River in Turkey. That's where the Lydians, they're called Lydians or Ludians or whatever, are going to be, and they're going to be mostly subjugated by the Hittites. When the Hittites fall, they're going to have a period where they start to get stronger. And this is going to be around the days of Ezekiel. They're going to have a decent little kingdom. And then the Assyrians are going to mostly subdue them. It's after the Assyrians fall that they're going to have a kingdom for a while. Okay. The Lydians have a king named Gyges. And that's why you're going to have scholars in the 1960s suggest that Gyges is Gog. Okay. It's a really bad theory. That's why a lot of your Bibles are going to say that Gog is in Turkey. Okay, but Gyges is a king who lived apparently within 100 years of Ezekiel. So that's why they're going to assume that. Remember, these scholars are not assuming that these prophets are really prophesying future events. They think they're writing commentary about stuff that's happening in their own day. And of course, this doesn't make any sense because in that day, Ezekiel is part of the captivity from the earlier waves of the Babylonian captivity of the Jews. And why is he going to write a prophecy about what's going on in northern Turkey? It doesn't make sense, okay? The Babylonians are expanding. They've conquered the Assyrian Empire. The Lydians, have their day in the sun until, essentially the Persians kind of re-subdue them. The Babylonians aren't really getting that much into northern Turkey. They're conquering Egypt, which the Assyrians weren't able to do. And so that's kind of their heyday is, they conquer Jerusalem and then they conquer Egypt. That's a big deal. And then it's after that they're going to fall to the Persians through really a big stealth move when they make the Euphrates River dry up and take Babylon without having to siege it. Okay. So, and then Aram is going to be your Aramean peoples. Think Damascus and that surrounding region. So think your Syrians, your Syria, proper. Okay. So it says the children of Aram, Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. This is where Abraham's father is going to move up among these people after his older brother gets killed by Nimrod. This Uz, I don't think is the Uz from the book of Job. There's another Uz who's a descendant of Esau, and I think that's where Job is. Okay, because he marries in with the Edomites. One of his friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, is an Edomite. And he's a descendant of Joktan, and Joktan is going to be the Arabian peoples on the west coast of the Red Sea. Okay, so these are basically going to be peoples that are going to be in and around the region of Damascus. That's going to be their core. Arphaxad begot Salah. Now this is going to be there's going to be a discrepancy here. We're going to get into their ages in a minute, but apparently Arphaxad had a son named Canaan. And his son Canaan is the one who is going to revive the pre-flood religions. This is in the book of Jubilees. And that's why you're going to see this son Canaan in Luke's genealogy in Luke 3. But it's not going to be in Matthew's genealogy in Matthew 1. Okay? Matthew's going to skip it and go to Salah, and this is what all the ancient Hebrew records are going to do. Well, according to the book of Jubilees, that guy, the reason he's not in the genealogy, he's blotted out from the book of life, so to speak, okay? He is the one who revives the ancient pre-flood religion. He finds like a stone tablet or something like that around the region of Mesopotamia. Remember, you have buildings, and that's why you have these tells and stuff like that, where you dig down and down and down, and underneath the cities is other cities, okay? Well, common sense is like, it takes a lot of dust to bury a city, okay? And yes, you're going to have this in the deserts where there's prevailing winds, but a lot of this is going to be they're building on top of pre-flood cities. They're building on top of foundations that had been there and were very well built from the pre-flood area. And so they're going to find these foundations, and then they're going to rebuild on top of them, okay? And well, in the context of doing this and digging up these former civilizations, he apparently finds a tablet with the mysteries of the religion, the false religion that existed in the pre-flood era. And remember, the Garden of Eden was originally, apparently the Tigris and Euphrates flowed out of it. So the original human civilization is probably right there, and they're in the core of it, okay? And he finds this false religion from the pre-flood era and starts to revive it, and that becomes the Babylonian mysteries. And it looks like one of the main components to it was astrology, because astrology is going to come from the Chaldeans. And you're going to find the church fathers and the early apologists like Hippolytus and Tatian the Assyrian and guys like this, is they're going to be commenting on astrology. But if you read Hippolytus's Against All Heresies, he's actually going to give you a detailed exposition of how astrology works and basically debunk it and show how it's illogical. Okay, it's really good. If you guys ever want to look that up, it's free online. So you look at Hippolytus's Against All Heresies. There are elements of his books that are missing, but these would have been a treasure trove. These guys, he's basically going to tell you about the Egyptian mysteries, the Persian mysteries, the Babylonian mysteries, the Assyrian mysteries, and how those are woven in with Greek philosophy to come up with all the Gnostic cults. It's very, very good. There's a couple things I would disagree. He kind of doesn't talk about Heraclitus a lot. Heraclitus kind of falls out of vogue, and I don't think they know Heraclitus that well. And there's very little stuff that we have of Heraclitus. I think he was probably the most legit of the Greek philosophers in terms of knowing where, the extent of where you can go with philosophy and understanding. You can't really find the truth with philosophy. You can only find out that there's a logos out there, but you can't define it. And he kind of went crazy after that, okay? But I think he was probably the most honest and had the most integrity of the Greek philosophers, and that's why he's going to fade. And guys like the sophists and Plato and Aristotle and all these guys who are mixing and mingling with homosexuals and pedophiles, they end up becoming the famous guys, okay? Anyways, so Salah is going to have a Canaan between him, and that might affect the genealogy. Salah might be his brother, his next in line, but the guy in the Book of Jubilees is going to say that Salah is his son, and Luke's going to have that his genealogy, but that kind of messes up the numerics of it. So I have a feeling that Salah is his brother, and that's why he gets counted as the next in line, if you will. It could be his son, but you're going to have some issues with the numbers in the genealogy if that's the case. And then Salah begets Eber. Okay, so this is important. Either Eber's uncle or his grandfather starts the Chaldean mysteries, and Eber is going to be the one who God chooses Abraham out of. So you see this very clear division from our Faxad, and some of them are going to become the good guys, which are going to be your Israelites, and the other ones are going to become the bad guys, which are going to be your Chaldean astrologers. So your two main religions of the world come from our Faxad. Okay. Remember how it says that the Japhethites are going to dwell in the tents of Shem. Well, that tent has to do with your priestly covering, if you will, okay? And our ultimate priestly covering is Christ, but your main religions in the world, so this is going to be your Chaldean astrology mystery religion. This is going to be your Islam, and which is going to come from Heber too. It's going to come from Joktan, okay? And then your Judaism and Christianity are all going to come from Arphaxad through his sons Canaan and Eber. Okay? So Eber was born to two sons. The name of the one was Peleg. This is going to be Abraham's ancestor. For in his days was the earth divided. Now, there's a couple ways you can look at this. I've mathed out the genealogies for these guys, and Peleg seems to be alive in the days of the Tower of Babel and the dispersion. Okay, and so there's a theory that Peleg was named what he was named prophetically because the earth is going to be divided in his day. There's also going to be the Book of Jubilees, which is going to say around the time that he was born, Abraham divides up the world map essentially for his sons. Okay, and then there's a third theory, which is like, no, there was an actual physical division. There was like a Pangea, and there was a physical division of earthquakes, and that's how Australia and the Western Hemisphere were separated out. I kind of lean in that direction because I kind of think this is where the myth of Atlantis comes from. I actually think you have this splitting of the earth for the fountains of the deep to come up in Noah's day. And then from that, you're going to have what becomes, from that divide is what becomes the eventual shift of the plates or whatever that becomes the earth the way it is right now. And that the moving of the so-called sinking of Atlantis is actually basically what's North America sinking over the horizon. So the Greeks are going to be the ones who account this, the sinking of Atlantis. And you're going to find this in Plato and Homer and stuff like that. Well, if they're in, they're the furthest west, which is Tarshish is going to be in England, they're going to be the ones that are seeing the Western Hemisphere, which would have been split away from them already, but it would have been reachable a lot easier. They're going to see it sinking over the horizon. And it's going to look like it's sinking into the ocean when it's actually disappearing over the horizon. So what you probably have is Greeks that are populating America for a while, and then it sinks into the ocean, and it's probably North America that they call Atlantis. And that's why you have, I think, the new Atlantis myths and stuff in America. I think there's people in mystery cults and stuff like that know America is Atlantis. Anyways, you have Peleg's brother is Joktan. And Joktan is, like I said, they're going to be in the south. So this is Joktan begat Almadad, Shalef, Hazarmaveth, Jerah, Hadaram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba. So you see another Sheba. And this could be the Sheba that transects the Arabian Sea. And you have Ophir, you have another Havilah. Okay? So that's where you could literally have a Havilah in India, because Alexander the Great reports gold just on the ground in India. And then you have Havilah in Oman, which there's gold in Yemen, Oman, okay? And then Jobab. Jobab is Job, okay? Take off the ab because his kids get killed, and you have the word means hated or persecuted father, okay? These are the sons of Joktan. So I think Ophir and Havilah could be like Yemen and Oman, but essentially it says their dwelling was from Mesha as thou goest unto Sephar, the mount of the east, okay? Now remember, Moses is from Egypt, okay? He's coming from Egypt. The mountain of the east is going to be east of Egypt, okay? So these records are probably already in Egypt, and that's where he's drawing them from. This mountain is going to be in southern Yemen. And then their dwelling was from Mesha. Let's see where Mesha is. So this is a good site, Encyclopedia of Creation Science. So it doesn't look like they have that, but I would assume these are, if you look at a map of Arabia, you see the entire west coast of Arabia is all mountain ranges. So once upon a time, remember, you have ice caps that are slowly being pushed north and south. Once upon a time, you probably had more river flow from these mountains, okay, before prevailing winds turned it all into desert. You still, I think, do have some snowy parts now, I think. I'm not positive. But they're going to essentially melt in the summers, freeze in the winters, and then you're going to have what are called wadis, which are basically like temporary rivers that like flood and then disappear, okay? But essentially, Mount Sephar is going to be down here in the south of Yemen. And this area, this mountainous region, remember the Jews are related to these people, okay? The Hebrews and the Joktanites are Hebrews too, okay? The Jews are going to settle among these people after the dispersion of Israel by the Romans and then getting kicked out of Alexandria by the Christians, okay? And they're going to settle down here. And this is where I think the term Sephardic Jew comes from. Now, the modern Jews are going to say the Sephardic Jew means the Spanish Jews. But I think what's going to happen is they're going to migrate with the Muslim conquest over to Spain. And that's going to be the tip of where they go. And from there, the Jews are going to go into France. And they're going to be, actually, Charlemagne is going to have Jewish bankers. Okay? Well, Charlemagne, his grandfather, is the one who stops the Muslims at the Battle of Tours. So as you're seeing the Muslims expand, the Jews are expanding as their merchants and financiers, okay? So it's like the Muslims are mostly interested in conquest, and then obviously, you know, their Islamic caliphate system. They're pulling in the Jews to help essentially stabilize what they've conquered with trade and money lending, okay? And that's how the Jewish moneylenders get up into the Germanic world through Charlemagne. And then they become, you know, you have the Jews up there and you have the Ashkenazi Jews and stuff like that after that, okay? Because they know that the Franks are descendants of Ashkenaz, okay? So that's where your Ashkenazi Jews come from, and that's where your Jewish banking comes from. It's really ancient because it goes back to the Jews being kicked out of Israel, and they've got, you know, the ones that have money have money. They settled in Alexandria and they were doing trade and stuff like that. And then they get kicked out of Alexandria by the Christians, and then they're settling among the Muslims. And in Muhammad's day, they are merchants and financiers. Okay, and the Muslims are traders. And if you've got people who are trading back and forth among you, the Jews are going to settle among them and get into money lending in order to basically, you know, expand their wealth, because they can't really take over these people's lands. They're too numerically small. They can't conquer anyone. And in a lot of cases, they can't own land in Europe and stuff like that because of the religion. And then they end up becoming the Muslims. The Muslims are very friendly with the Jews up until the modern era. Okay? That's why the Jews are going to settle among the Turks. The Turks don't have a problem with it. You don't really have anti-Semitism among the Muslims until the modern Jewish state. You don't really have a major problem with them, okay? And then around the time the Jews start settling in the Middle East, that's when you start having anti-Semitism pop up among the Russians, among the Germans, and among the Muslims. And it's almost like God is forcing the Jews to go back home. So you see the Jews start to get persecuted in Yemen and Persia. And like I said, in Yemen, this is where Mount Sephar is. And that's why I think Sephardic Jew comes from Mount Sephar. So, again, I could be wrong. There's other scholars that probably disagree with me, but I would want to hear their reasons why, okay? Let's see here. So it says, these are the sons of Shem after their families, after their tongues, after their lands, after their nations. So imagine now, remember how these people are getting pushed up and down rivers. Those sons of Joktan, it looks like they probably migrate out of Nimrod's kingdom. Remember, you have Abraham's son get killed by them. Well, we're going to get in the Tower of Babel in a minute, but it looks like the descendants of Arphaxad are the main people that Nimrod oppresses, okay? And so you're going to have some of those descendants that are going to skedaddle out of there via their camels and stuff like that down through the desert into the other end of the desert, and they're kind of safe from Nimrod because he has to cross desert to get to them. We know he does cross desert to get to them because Job gets his herds taken by the Chaldeans. Okay, but essentially it's the people that Nimrod are dominating that are messing with Job. Okay. So then it says, these are the sons of Shem after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations in their nations. And by these the nations were divided on the earth after the flood. Okay? So now it's talking about, here's the languages, here's the division of the languages, the original table of nations. And if you count them, there's 70. If you don't count Nimrod, there's 70 nations. Okay? You have some people who are going to count 72 nations, and the reason is they're counting Nimrod's nation and they're counting Abraham's nation because he's a separate nation, and that's where you get the discrepancy between 70 and 72. The text says 70. Okay, you're going to get 72 out of I think it's the Septuagint. And then you're going to have translations of the modern New Testament that are going to take that 72 and they're going to add it into the New Testament where it originally said 70. Septuagint means 70, not 72. Okay? The Septuagint is literally a version of the Bible for the Gentiles, the 70 nations, in Greek, because that's the main language. And I think it was commissioned by the Maccabees. I think it probably started out with some traditions in Alexandria, maybe the 5 books of Moses for the Alexandrian Greek-speaking Jews, but I think it's probably compiled and brought together under the Maccabees, but it looks like there was never a solid book called the Septuagint until you get to the days about Origen, okay? You didn't have a single book called the Septuagint going around. You just had the Greek translation of the the Old Testament, but it was understood that it's to the nations, and that's why you have Jews and Gentiles turn into Jews and Greeks. Okay. Now, this is going to tell you how the Table of Nations came about. Remember, this is going to happen after Abraham defeats Amraphel, and it's going to basically lead to the decline of Nimrod's kingdom. Remember, Nimrod lives to be like 200 and some years old. When Abraham defeats him, Abraham's around 100 years old. He's a younger man, and he's got about 3,000 guys with him total. He's got like 300 of his own, and then he's got it's amazing how Abraham defeats Nimrod with almost the exact same size army as the Spartans have against the Persians, which makes me wonder if the Spartans and the Persians is not just like the story of the 300 Spartans is not just a Danite rip-off of this story, and then they use it as propaganda against the Persians to make the Spartans seem great after the fact. Wouldn't shock me, because again, the Danites were known for making stuff up and fudging history. Okay, so you have the whole earth was of one language and one speech, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east. Now, why does it say they're journeying from the east? Because the Tigris and Euphrates rivers are going to start out up. You don't see this in most maps, but they're going to start out going from the area where they're originally settling after the flood, way up here, and they're going to go east, and then they're going to circle back towards the east. Okay. So that's why you see them up here. But the original tributaries are going to be, the east is going to be where they are up here in Armenia, and they're going to go here, and then they're going to go downstream from there and find Baghdad. Okay, so this is the east, which is where they are. It's northeast, but they start out in the east, and then they travel over here, and then they go down here. Okay, so it's basically where they're migrating. It's not. It's saying as they journeyed, but it's really migrating. Okay. So this is, it came to pass as they journeyed towards the east that they found a plain in Shinar and dwelt there. So again, he's just talking generally about humanity. It's not like everyone went there, but they migrated towards the east, and they ended up finding the plain of Shinar, which is essentially the Tigris Euphrates River Valley. Okay, and they dwelt there. So this is humanity. Okay, and they said to one another, "Let us bake brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and slime they had for mortar. So they're actually building a ceramic, oil-based, pitched, like Noah's Ark, waterproof tower. Okay, And they said, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make a name, lest we be scattered upon the face of the earth. Okay? So, again, why are they in danger of being scattered upon the face of the earth? Remember, they're not, the languages aren't divided yet, so why are they saying this? Because Nimrod's been defeated by Abraham, okay? And it says, listen to this, it says, let us make, this word says, do or make, accomplish, advance, appoint, become, bring forth, bruise, have, charge, commit, deal. Okay? This is just a theory, and maybe I'm completely wrong here. But I think what he's saying is, let us build a city in the tower, and let us make Shem do it. I think it's the Shemites that they're subjugating to build the Tower of Babel. And because Shem, the name for a name, because notice you don't see for ourselves, there's nothing relating that, right? You just see let us make a name. Let us make a name, okay? So you look at different versions of the Bible, and it says, and let us make us a name. And let us make us a name. King James is going to say, Bible and Basic English, let us make a great name for ourselves. These are all embellishments. This is not what it says. Let us make for ourselves a name. Let us make us a name. I would want to see the original Hebrew, because let us make ourselves a name. Maybe they're saying let's build this huge tower to keep ourselves as central to the world, because this is kind of like your backup plan if God floods the earth again. Josephus says that's why they built the tower. So maybe they're saying, let's make a name for this people group, and that's where you have title, King of Nations, and maybe. But there's a possibility that he's saying let's make Shem do it. Okay, in other words, let's build this tower and let's make Shem, the Semites, do the work. Okay? In other words, they're subjugating the Shemites to build the tower, lest we be scattered upon the face of the whole earth. Okay? So this is the decline of Nimrod's civilization. Remember, he starts out, actually, the extra biblical literature says he starts out with just like 300 trained soldiers, and they basically start subduing and subjugating and conquering peoples. And then he keeps up that administration for, imagine him doing this for like a century or whatever. And he eventually ends up with an empire that is dominating. Remember how it says the beginnings of his kingdom were here, okay? So he starts out small and gets bigger and bigger, but he essentially starts out with 300 guys and just subdues the peoples around him, and then turns them into his tributaries and armies and allies. And he's got a good system going, because he's got this trade monopolized, and so he's probably enriching various rulers and stuff around him. So think of it more like an alliance than him just being a dictator. Then he loses to Abraham, and that's when he becomes a dictator, and it seems like he enslaves the Semites in the area to build the Tower of Babel. That seems like what happens, because remember, our Faxad is going to be in Babel. Well, he's already a tyrant, and in Abraham's day, this is extra biblical literature, what it's saying is that he receives a prophecy. Remember, he's got astrologers and stuff like this, okay? And these are going to be from Arphaxad's son, Canaan. Well, Arphaxad's other son, Salah, which is either Canaan's son or Canaan's brother, is going to have Eber, and Eber is going to have Peleg and Joktan, and out of Peleg and Joktan is going to come eventually Abraham. Well, Abraham's father was apparently an administrator in Nimrod's kingdom. He's in Ur of the Chaldeans, and this is close to the heartland or the core of Nimrod's. Remember, that region south of Iraq is going to be kind of the core of his kingdom, because that's what bottlenecks the trade between Arabia and what is now Persia, and then the Persian Gulf, which is going to connect you to Egypt and Ethiopia. So all that port trade, that's coming up through there. And so that's kind of, think of that as being like their New York City, if you will. Okay? This big sprawl of ports and stuff like this. And then obviously the upper nexus of trade is going to be Babylon, and then the northern fortification area is going to be Assyria. Okay? And Nimrod is basically going to get a prophecy from one of his Chaldean astrologers that this star is signifying, it's like a shooting star or something like that, is signifying somebody that is going to come and defeat him. And it's the son of Nahor, which is Abraham's dad. So it's basically signifying the birth of this son. So Nahor he orders Nahor to bring his son. He wants to meet him. He's heard there's a prophecy about him, and he kills his son. Well, that is apparently Lot's dad, and that's why Abraham's dad is going to take the family, move away into the Aram, away from their own people, into the people of the Arameans, and he's going to start a city up there, and he's going to name it after Lot's dad. Okay? And basically they're going to stay up there away from the danger, because this son is sacrificed in place of Abraham. And he knows that he's going to kill Abraham, and he gives him his other son, and then Abraham lives. And so Abraham obviously has the burden of, your older brother was killed so that you might live. And that's why that older brother has a son named Lot, and that's why Abraham is taking care of him. Okay? So this is extra biblical literature, but it's a very reasonable story. The Jews and the Muslims both believe it. Okay? It's a very reasonable story in light of the fact what happened to Abraham's brother, why is Lot with him instead of with his father, and why are they not living in Ur of the Chaldees anymore. Okay? It makes sense. It could be a conjecture that came back the day, or it could be an oral tradition that is legit. Okay? But again, since the Muslims are descended from Abraham too, and they have the same story, obviously they have a version of it. They have very similar story, but they have different stories having to do with, like, Abraham offering up Ishmael instead of Isaac. So the fact that they have corruption of their stories, but then some of the stories are the same, says that it probably was related to a common oral history. Okay? But that's not the main thing. The main thing is about God's covenant promises with Abraham and why it's leading to Israel going into the promised land now. Okay? That's what Moses is focusing on. He's not focusing on all of Abraham's backstory. Okay? So he says they went, and it says so it says they don't want to be scattered across the whole earth. And then it says, then the Lord came down to see the city and its tower. So Yahovah came down to see the city and its tower. So this is Jesus. And the Lord said, Yahovah said, behold, the people is one. He's talking to someone. Okay? And they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Let us go down. So this is either the Lord talking to the Holy Spirit. I don't believe this royal we thing. Or it is the Lord talking to angels who are under his authority. It seems like it could be both. And it says, the Lord said, let us go down and there confound their language. So it's going down to Babel to confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. Okay? Notice it's saying they're building a city. So Babel seems to be a city and a tower. Okay? So they quit building Babel. Therefore, the name of it is called Babel, because the Lord there did confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the earth. So the walls of Babylon are not built in this day. The walls of Babylon are going to be built in the days of the Assyrian Empire by a daughter-in-law of Shalmaneser, and her name is going to be Shemarath, which is where Semiramis comes from, okay? She has either a husband or a consort or something like that named Ninus. And Alexander Hislop's The Two Babylon is going to say that Ninus is Nimrod. That is not true. This is like 1,000 years after Nimrod. Okay, so Take Nimrod and Semiramis and throw it out and learn that reason why, okay? You don't want to have anything that's coming from Alexander Hislop's The Two Babylons is myth. It is bad scholarship mixing in stuff to try to prove that the Roman Catholic symbolistic and ritualistic system is a deliberate Babylonian mystery cult. I do not think it is. It definitely has roots in Gnosticism and Greek philosophy. Definitely has idolatry in it. It definitely has goddess worship in it. But it's not an intended Babylonian mystery cult that has been preserved. So don't, again, all three branches of Christendom are corrupt. But there's just as much of that corruption in the Protestant branch as there is in the Catholic branch. The Catholic and the Orthodox all practice idolatry, Mariology, iconodualism, or whatever. And so you just don't want to jump on that bandwagon. That's the anti-Christmas, anti-Easter, Isis is Ishtar, and all that stuff. It's just not true. Okay? What you have is an original idea of a Trinity that is man, woman, and child. And what you have is the royal families of these various nations start to make themselves out to be that Trinity. And that's why you're going to have several different kingdoms. Remember, they're all inspired by demons, okay? They're worshiping demons. That's what Paul says. And these demons are convincing these royal families to have the people worship them as God. And so you keep seeing it happen among royal families. And it starts out with ancestor worship, where their key ancestors become worshipped as gods. And so you're going to see the father, mother, and firstborn of that family become their Trinity. Okay? And then over time, it's going to be kings that conquer or are especially powerful who make themselves out to be gods after they die. And then in time, you're eventually going to have people like the Roman Caesars and like the Pharaohs and like Nebuchadnezzar and like the king of Persia, who, remember, they're all being influenced by either men who are influenced by demons or demons themselves to have themselves, while they're living, worshipped as a god. And that's where it gets to the point where, okay, if you die and then people after you worship you as a god, that's on them. But if you have yourself worshipped as a god, that's on you. And that's when God usually overthrows those empires. So the Romans are going to start to diminish after they start doing that. Remember, they're hundreds and hundreds of years before that, and then they fall within 100 or so years of starting to do that. Maybe 200 years, okay? Persians, Pharaohs, Babylonians, when they start doing that, their empires are pretty much have signed their death warrant, okay? So that's the original, okay? And that's why I believe this man, woman, child trinity was the original idea, because it's Father, Spirit, and Son. And the original man, woman, and child are designed after the original Trinity, okay? So there's not a monolithic religion. There's no Nimrod and Semiramis. There's no religion that comes from Babel that is spread throughout the whole world, okay? That is all myth. What comes from the Chaldeans primarily is astrology. What comes from the Egyptians is Trinitarianism. It's that they're obsessed with triangles. Okay, the pyramids, Pythagoras learns his stuff from them. That comes from the Egyptian. What comes from the Egyptians also is reincarnation, and it spreads to the Hindus. Okay. So you have most of the mystery cult stuff that we have comes from Egypt. Astrology comes from Chaldea. You have the Brahmins who have their own myths and religion and stuff, and eventually that's going to turn into the Brahminic caste system. But you have all these different family gods and stuff like that among the Hindus or among the Indian peoples. And then the Brahmins are going to be the main sophisticated philosophical religion among them. And then in Persia, you're going to have a mixture of the religions of basically Israel and the Brahmins, which turns into Zoroastrianism. And then eventually you're going to have another mixture that's going to turn into Manichaeism, which is going to be a mixture of Buddhism and Christianity and Judaism. And then eventually you're going to have another mixture that comes from a mixture of Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and Hinduism in the 18th century after those get revived, which is Baha'ism. Okay, so Persia is kind of at that intersection between, the Egyptian and Judeo-Christian religions and the Vedic religions, which is going to be your Hinduism and Brahmanism, and Persia being in the mix of that. They keep having this one true prophet who's meant to merge all the religions pop up, and there's like 3 or 4 of them in history. Okay, so that's where that comes from. And now we're going to get into the ancestry of Shem down to Noah, and this is where they actually count the years. So this is the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begot Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. Shem lived after he begot Arphaxad 100 years, begot other sons and daughters. Arphaxad lived 35 years and begat Salah, and Arphaxad lived and begat Salah 403 years and begat sons and daughters. Salah lived and begat Eber. Okay? This is why I don't believe Salah. Again, this is the Book of Jubilees talking, and I think the Book of Jubilees fudges some stuff, okay? I think Salah would have been Canaan's brother, not his son, because if he's 35 years old and he's begotten Salah, then there's no room for him to have begotten Canaan, okay? So I think Salah would have been Canaan's brother. So Arphaxad lived after he begot Salah 403 years and begot sons and daughters. Salah lived 30 years and begot Eber. Salah lived after he begot Eber 403 years and begot sons and daughters. Eber lived 430 years and begot Peleg. Eber lived after he begot Peleg 430 years and begot sons and daughters. So here's going to be your division between Peleg and Joktan, okay? These guys are in the Table of Nations, and so are Joktan's. I think they're 9 kids, okay? So Peleg's probably the younger one. Or no, I'm sorry, Joktan is actually the youngest. So Peleg, it says, he lived 430 years and begat sons and daughters. Peleg lived 30 years and begat Ru. Peleg lived after he begat Ru 209 years. Ru lived 32 years and begat Serug. After Serug, 207 years. Serug lived 30 years and begat Nahor. After he got Nahor, he lived 200 years. So Nahor lived 29 years, begat Terah. And I'm sorry, it's Terah who's Abraham's dad, not Nahor. And then Terah lived 70 years. We got Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Okay? So when you see this, same thing when you see with Noah, where he says Noah lived this 100 years and he begot so-and-so. That means by the time he was that old, he had all those kids. Okay? So Terah lived 70 years, and by the time he was 70, he had begotten all 3 of these kids. Okay? Doesn't mean they're all triplets. Same thing with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay? There's oldest and youngest. But by the time Noah was 500 years old, he had begotten those 3 sons, okay? And of course, it's normal to live to be over 100 years before you have your first kid in Noah's day, and that's why their kids start having kids after they're 100. Now, after the ages start to diminish, it starts becoming normal to have a kid when you're around 30, okay? And so he probably had, you have Nahor and Haran. So Nahor is apparently named after his father Nahor. That's probably the firstborn. Haran is probably the second one. That's the one who dies. And Abraham is the youngest. So Nahor is going to be the one where his, I think it's his son, Isaac's kids are going to come from. Or Isaac's bride's going to come from Rebecca. And then his son is going to be where Jacob's wives Rachel and Leah come from. Haran is dead, and his son Lot is going to be with Abraham. So it says these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abraham, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. There you go. And Haran died in the presence of his father. That's what this means. His father was there when he died. Okay, and they're going to say Nimrod killed him. In the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. So Abraham and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran. So apparently she marries his daughter, and Abraham has basically adopted his son. But Sarai was barren, and she had no child. And Terah took Abraham, his son, Lot, the sons of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, and Abraham, his wife, and they went forth from Ur of the Chaldees to the land of Canaan, and they came unto Canaan and dwelt there. Okay, so I don't know why he doesn't mention Nahor. Nahor might have already migrated to, it looks like they're in the area of Damascus among the Arameans. So he might have already migrated there, and that's why Terah moves over there. But he brings them to a city called Haran, and he probably names the city after his son, or takes over the city because he's a prominent older man. And they dwell there. Okay? So that's where they are, where it says the Lord calls Abraham. Okay? Now, we're going to learn that Abraham is not going to leave until after Haran is dead, but that's where they are. Okay? So Abraham is probably a young kid when they move there. They migrate to this land of Haran, which is in let's see where Haran is. So I thought it was in Syria, but it's actually in Turkey. His brother Nahor, I forget where he is, but it's up in Syria. But anyways, Haran is outside of the reach of Baghdad, way up here, and they travel from Ur, way down here, way over here, to get away from Nimrod. Okay? And then after, he's going to be right here in Turkey when God calls him. And notice that's right in the southern border of Turkey, just north of Syria. Okay? That's going to be where Abraham's story starts. But if you get into the extra biblical literature, it really starts with him trying to be killed by Nimrod. So the irony of the situation, how God works this out, is he seems to move Nimrod to kidnap Lot, and that leads to Abraham taking revenge on him to rescue Lot, and that's how God does away with Nimrod. He doesn't kill Nimrod then, but he takes out his armies, and then he eventually lives to be like 210, and then he dies. I personally think Nimrod was murdered because he dies relatively young for his age group. The descendants of Cush, if you look at where they are, you can kind of line them up with their brothers. And if you look at where Cush would have been basically a cousin to Arphaxad. And Arphaxad lives to be 530 years, and his kids live to be 403 years. So Nimrod lives to be about half that. Okay? Now, there's an extra biblical account. I don't know if there's any legitimacy to this, but it sounds pretty good. That Shem, we know Shem is still alive when Jacob and Esau are young. Okay? Remember, they're going to be like 40 when Jacob goes away. And Esau is a mighty hunter, just like Nimrod used to be a mighty hunter. Well, you have this story in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh, some people think, is Nimrod. And Gilgamesh meets this guy named Enkidu, and they have all kinds of adventures together, okay? And they go hunting, and they go like looking for beasts and stuff like this. I think they find a dragon at one point in time, okay? Now, dinosaurs still exist here. You have a brontosaurus apparently in the Jordan River that's accounted in Job, okay? You have Leviathan, which is like a plesiosaur or something like that, accounted in Job, okay? So the story that I found, and I think this is in the book of Jasher, I could be mistaken, but I found it somewhere, is that Shem commissions Esau to kill Nimrod. Remember, Shem is kind of like, it's Shem's descendants who are being oppressed by Nimrod to build the Tower of Babel, okay? The languages have been confused, so Nimrod has lost most of his power base at this point, okay? He's still there, he's still in power, but he's not nearly as powerful as he was, okay? And Shem would be a very old man, and it's Shem's descendants that Nimrod, which is Ham's descendant, is oppressing, okay? So that's going to be the Elamites, who are his subordinate peoples. That's going to be the Assyrians. That's going to be Arphaxad. So those are like 3 out of Shem's 4 kids. Okay, the only ones he's not oppressing are 5 kids or whatever. The only ones he's not oppressing is the Elamites or the Lydians and the Arameans. Okay, so Shem, wherever Shem is he's among his descendants. Okay, and probably where Abraham goes and Haran go to where Abraham and Lot and those guys and their dad goes to Haran is up in the region, which would be Arameans and Lydians, okay, which are the Semitic peoples that Nimrod is not controlling. And possibly the Assyrians could be, the border of Nimrod's dominion, okay, because they seem to worship a guy that looks like Nimrod. Now, Shem, again, you're going to have Esau, who's a mighty hunter. And when Esau comes back totally famished, remember, he's starving. He's so starving, he gives away his birthright for some food, okay? Now, why was he unable to procure food anywhere from neighboring tribes or anything by the time he gets to Jacob? Well, the story is because he was killing Nimrod. And you have Gilgamesh and Enkidu could be Nimrod and Esau, and they become friends. And Gilgamesh is this king and stuff like that, and they're actually looking for what they believe is Noah in that day. Well, so Noah lives to be after the flood 350 years. Okay? So if you do the math on that, 350 years from Noah's flood is going to put you around 2000. Well, 2000 is around the time that Abraham's born. So it's probably not Noah they're looking for. It's probably Shem. And they're looking for somebody who was there before the flood. That's who Esau or that's who Enkidu and Gilgamesh are looking for in this epic of Gilgamesh. Well, what I think is going down is that Nimrod is looking to either capture or kill Shem in order to have dominance over the Semites. That seems to be his entire MO. Remember, the Cushites, the Shemites are meant to be the dominant priesthood of the world based on Noah's prophecy when he says that Japheth is going to dwell in the tents of Shem. And so what Nimrod seems to want to do is, remember, he's got Arphaxad with this counterfeit Canaanite religion, but his empire is falling apart. So what he seems to want to do is capture Shem in order to make sure that he either is able to kill or have control over the priesthood that's going to be the priesthood of the world. They don't know where this is coming from yet, but he's picking up that it's coming from Abraham. So he's got a descendant of Abraham, and I'm assuming this Enkidu is Esau. And he's like, so the Epic of Gilgamesh, remember the beginning of Nimrod's kingdom is Iraq, and Gilgamesh is from Uruk, okay, which is probably Iraq, okay? It's also where the Uruk-hai comes from, orcs, okay? So Gilgamesh is basically, he builds ziggurats or temple towers. There's Nimrod all over it. It says it starts with, let's see, an Enkidu who becomes Gilgamesh's friend, and Enkidu lives with animals, suckling at their breasts, grazing in the meadows, and drinking at their watering places. So he's herdsman. A hunter discovers him and sends a temple prostitute into the wilderness to tame him. In that time, people considered women and sex calming forces. So it looks like he gives him a prostitute. Well, if Esau is a mighty hunter and he could stay out there in the wilderness, he could, drink from a goat's milk or whatever. Just suck right from the teat of the goat and drink its milk, okay? I don't know if that would be considered gross. I don't know. They get the milk out of there anyways. And then it says they decide to steal trees from a distant cedar forest forbidden to mortals. That sounds like the Lebanese cedar forests that are so famous. And then there's a terrifying demon named Hamu Baba, a devoted servant of Enlil. Enlil is El, that's God to them, the god of the earth, wind, air, and guards it. Okay. The two heroes make a perilous journey into the forest, standing side by side, fight with the monster with the assistance of Shamash, the sun god. I wonder if that's Shem. They kill him. Then they cut down the forbidden trees, fashion the tallest into an enormous gate, make the rest into a raft, and float it back to Uruk. Okay. On the return, Ishtar, the goddess of love, is overcome with lust for Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh spurns her. Enraged, the goddess asks his father Anu, the god of the sky, to send a bull from heaven to punish him. The bull comes down from the sky, bringing with him 7 years of famine. Supposedly, this is a whole killing of a pig on Easter, that Tammuz was killed by a boar. Okay. Gilgamesh and Enkidu wrestle with the bull and kill it. The gods meet the council and agree one of the two friends must be punished for the transgression. They decide Enkidu is going to die. He takes ill, suffers immensely, shares his visions in the underworld with Gilgamesh. When he finally dies, Gilgamesh is heartbroken. So in this tale, Enkidu dies. Okay. Gilgamesh can't stop grieving for Enkidu. He can't stop brooding about the prospect of his own death. Exchanging his kingly garments for animal skins as a way of mourning Enkidu, he sets off into the wilderness. So notice Enkidu, he's wearing animal skins as a way of mourning Enkidu. Esau puts on animal skins or Jacob puts on animal skins to mimic Esau because he's so hairy. Okay, and then it says after the flood, the gods granted Utanpishtim eternal life. The Mesopotamian, that's Noah in their world. After the flood, the gods granted Utanpishtim eternal life. Gilgamesh hopes Utanpishtim can tell him how he might avoid a death too. Gilgamesh's journey takes him to the Twin Peak mountain called Mashu. That sounds like Meshech. I could be wrong. And the sun sets into the side of the mountain one night and goes to the other side in the morning. Utanpishtim lives beyond the mountain, but two scorpion monsters guard its entrance, refuse to allow Gilgamesh into the tunnel that passes through it. Gilgamesh pleads with them and they relent. After a harrowing passage through the darkness, Gilgamesh emerges into a beautiful garden by the sea. There he meets Siduri, a veiled tavern keeper, and tells her about his quest. She warns him that seeking immortality is futile and that he should be satisfied with the pleasures of this world. However, when she can't turn him away from his purpose, she directs him to Urshanabi, the ferryman. Urshanabi takes Gilgamesh on the boat journey across the sea and through the waters of death to Utanpishtim. So that's probably where the river Styx comes from. The boatmen on the journey in the river Styx. Utanpishtim tells Gilgamesh the story of the flood and how the gods met in the council and decided to destroy humanity. Ea, the god of wisdom, and warned Utanpishtim about the god's plans, and told him how to fashion a gigantic boat in which the family and the seed of every living creature might escape. Boy, that sounds an awful lot like the Holy Spirit telling Noah to build an ark. Okay. When the waters finally receded, the gods regretted what they had done and agreed they would never destroy humankind again. Boy, this sounds an awful like notice it's the gods. Why? Elohim is plural. It means gods. Okay. Utanpishtim was rewarded with eternal life. Men would die, but humankind would continue. When Gilgamesh insists that he would be allowed to live forever, Utanpishtim gives him a test. If you think you can stay alive for eternity, he says, surely you can stay awake for a week. Gilgamesh tries and immediately fails, so Utanpishtim orders him to clean himself up, put on his royal garments again, and return to Uruk where he belongs. Just as Gilgamesh is departing, however, Utanpishtim's wife convinces him to tell Gilgamesh about a miraculous plant that restores youth. Gilgamesh finds the plant and takes it with him, planning to share it with the elders of Uruk, but a snake steals the plant one night while they are camping. As the serpent slithers away, it sheds its skin and becomes young again. So that is an interesting tale, but essentially it looks like it's mixing stuff having to do with Esau, Noah, and Nimrod. Okay, I don't think if there's any truth to this legend probably emerged after Nimrod was dead. And of course, it's going to have Nimrod in Kindu dying instead of Nimrod, which is Esau. And of course, Esau goes on to live and populate a whole bunch of people. And Nimrod dies apparently about half as old as he should. Okay? if he's going to talk to anybody, remember this is Nimrod, who is in his older years, probably intending to die. He's probably talking to Shem. Okay, so he says he goes up in the mountains near Nasha. That would be probably southern Turkey, where Shem probably is among the Semites, and he's trying to meet them. And I think Shem orders Nimrod killed. Because remember, Nimrod's natural lifespan would have been like another 200 years. Okay, so if you look at that, Nimrod's a younger son of Cush. Let's say Cush is like, I did the math on this with the whole table and stuff, and let's say Cush was like 200 to 300 years old when he has Nimrod. I'm putting it at 200 years. And Cush is going to be roughly born probably within 5-10 years of the flood. Because this is Shem's younger brother, and Shem's firstborn is 2 years after the flood. So you look at Cush, having him 200 years later, you're looking at 1800, which means Nimrod is probably 100 to 200 years by the time Abraham is doing his thing. Nimrod is powerful, and by the time you get to Esau, he's going to be in his 200s, okay? And he dies before he gets really old. So what happens? I think Shem orders Esau to off him. And Esau is getting done offing him when he is fleeing, because he knows he killed Nimrod. They know this is Nimrod's hunting buddy. That's what I think is going on. And remember, Nimrod is diminishing in terms of his national power, but in his region, he's still very powerful. And Esau knows he's got to run. He's got to skedaddle. He is going to be hunted by these people. Now, the Amorites are probably eventually going to take over after Nimrod's dead, and so Esau is safe. Okay? But I want you to understand what happens in the biblical narrative that we know for sure. Esau is married into the Hivites and the Horites. He's got a Hivite wife and a Horite wife. And what you find out is that when Nebuchadnezzar goes over that region, it says that he basically decimates them. So the family line where Esau's kids come from, before Abraham goes and rescues Lot, gets decimated. And so Esau is now married into these families who have been decimated by Nimrod. So he's got another incentive to kill Nimrod, okay? And then Esau is eventually going to become the dominant guy. Remember, he's going to have a troop of soldiers around him that are probably Horites and Hivites and some of his own descendants. But by the time Jacob meets him again, and they're both going to be about their 50s, Esau's got like 100, 200 men with him. Okay, well, why? Well, he's only has probably 3 sons, and maybe he's got some grandkids by now. So where are all these people with him? Well, these people with him are going to be the Horites. Well, when he kills Nimrod, and this is my presumption, if he kills Nimrod, he becomes the man to the Horites. Okay? And so he's not just married into them, he becomes basically like their lord. Okay? And so the whole theory that Shem commissioned Esau to kill Nimrod is, I think it's a pretty decent theory. Again, it's a story, and it could be an oral account of something that really happened. I honestly don't remember where I first heard it, but that would mean that when Esau shows up to famished from, remember, he's supposedly this great hunter, right? Like when his dad sends him to go kill a dish to bring it to him, he goes and kills it and comes back, and he's back there that day or later on, right? And with that dish all cooked up. So he knows how to hunt. So why is he showing up famished to Esau? And the answer is I think he killed Nimrod. And he got revenge for his wives' families and also for Abraham. And remember, Abraham's it's going to be Lot, which those guys are going to be just north of them. Their dad was killed by Nimrod. So all those people in that region have a reason to really hate Nimrod. And so you probably have people who are totally rooting for Esau to kill this guy. But Esau he's still powerful, and he doesn't want to get hunted down and killed by this guy. And so he's running for his life and running and running and running. And in that context, he probably hasn't eaten in a while. And so he gets to, if you just stay moving, you can go really far in, the course of a few days. If you just move and move and move and go and go and go. But you're going to be really, really stinking hungry, okay? And he's going to be like starving, dying. Well, if he's a mighty hunter, he's used to probably fasting all day and doing stuff like this, but he's probably gone for days without eating. And he's starving. And when he gets to Esau cooking a stew, Esau capitalizes on that, or Jacob capitalizes on that. So that seems to be what happens with them. Again, this is all Nimrod's kingdom. This is all the Table of Nations. And this is like the backdrop for Abraham's story when it's going to start to come up, okay? So that takes you up to Genesis 11. Genesis 12 is going to be the starting of Abraham being called by God. And Genesis 12 through, let's see, I'm probably going to try to do Genesis 12 through Genesis 25 and just try to do Abraham's whole life in one chunk, okay? So I'm not going to read over everything for you guys. Read this stuff for yourself if you're following along, but I'm just going to kind of give you a bunch of insights and details related to things that I've studied over the years. So hope you guys are blessed by this. Again, get your Table of Nations pretty locked down. Get out a piece of paper, get out a printout of it, and just write down these nations, because when you get into the Gog-Magog wars and these other prophecies later on, it's going to help you a lot to understand where these nations are on the map. And that wants to be kind of your baseline. I've looked at all the ones online, and they're not that good. Get your own one. Check out this site that I told you about. It's going to be this, I think it's called Creation Wiki. Probably the Creation Science Museum put this up, but Creation Wiki, and just plug in those names and just read and see what you find for each of them. That you want to make your own map, and you want to study prophecy for yourself based on the latest information, because a lot of your Bibles are printed by people who are biased towards millennialism or biased towards pre-tribulationism, and they're going to have theories in there that are not going to be the best. So I would recommend that you do that, so you have your own baseline for where these nations are. Okay, get your framework down, and so when you start reading prophecies and history and stuff like that in the Bible, it's not super foreign to you. That's all I can think of. You guys, I hope you're blessed by this. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.